We also have a congressional candidate here, and different people have to do different things at different times. And we got a congressional candidate who's an educator, who's currently employed by the state educating, so he hasn't been as active and out as some of his opponents, but he's finna get started to ramp up to a good aspect, and he wanted to come on his listening tour to Baldwin. He's challenging Ms. Montgomery, and after he's able to do a bigger thing, I'm sure he's gonna be more active, and he's gonna be campaigning for each and every single vote as well. He's a very nice man. He's a philosopher and author, and he's thinking about being your next congressional candidate. So he's took a long way to get here, but he's here tonight, him as well as his wife. He's been to Sandusville, Georgia with the Mr. Lee incident. He spoke there in Sandusville on the concerns of the citizens there. So he's been active as much as he can as a citizen, and he's thinking about becoming the candidate, and he wants to speak to you directly. Give him a hand, Mr. Richard Dean Wingfield.
Thanks for having me here. I've been teaching 35 years down the road in Athens at the University of Georgia, and I've decided to leave the ivory tower behind because I feel that there are bold proposals that we have to be advocating that no one has come out for. Not only no Republican, no government official, but no candidate and no Democratic candidate. And the Democratic Party has been on a losing streak from which it will not recover unless it embraces the kind of proposals that I'm going to be put before you. Now, I think we all know that our Constitution put forward a project of civil and political freedoms. Our founders misinterpreted those freedoms and misapplied them by initiating our republic in a way where the only people who could exercise all those civil and political rights were men who were white, who had a certain amount of property. Now, 2 centuries of civil rights struggles have largely succeeded in extending civil and political rights to all our adult citizens. Yet, it's become increasingly clear with these very victories that the freedoms enshrined in our Constitution are not enough. Despite being the richest nation in human history, with the greatest military might, the greatest scientific prowess, a few not so bad philosophers, we have still become the most unequal nation in the developed world, with the least social mobility. The top 1% own as much wealth as the bottom 90%. A quarter of all Americans have zero or negative net worth. 75% of all Americans have no more than $700 keeping them from financial ruin. Almost half our children are growing up in poverty. And no one here can tell their children that they're going to do as well as we have. And we are facing a situation where the full-time job is under threat, both from further advances in automation and the rise of the gig economy. Employers can now use the internet to outsource all employment anywhere in the world with all of these freelancers. Now, we need a new social bill of rights. A new social bill of rights that is anchored in the true right to work, not the phony right to work that all the slave states have adopted to take away from employees like me our rights to negotiate collectively over the conditions of our employment. No, the true right to work is the right of every willing and able adult to have full-time employment at a just wage. We need to recognize and enforce this right. The market can never be counted on to provide employment for everyone. Government has to step in. Our government has to step in and ensure that everyone who wants a job has a job. And this will be a completely transformative situation. This will provide the bedrock of economic independence and security. Think of what our country would be like if every young person coming of age knows they have a full-time job awaiting them that serves the public good at a fair wage. Think of what the world would be like if everyone coming out of prison knows they have a job awaiting them at a fair wage that serves the public good. Think of what everyone returning from military service would be in a situation like if they had a full-time job awaiting them, that the government would provide if the market does not. Think of our situation, those of us who have employment, knowing that we never have to fear being downsized or reduced to part-time work, because we can always rely on the government as an employer of last resort and give us jobs that will serve the public good. Because we're not just talking about make work. We're talking about all the jobs that profit-seeking enterprises are neither willing nor able to provide. We have huge infrastructure needs. We have a new green infrastructure. We need to have broadband for all. We need to supply the services that are lacking throughout our counties. We need to provide public transportation for all. There are all sorts of benefits that need to be implemented, and we can put everyone to work. Now this, again, is a game-changing situation. And when we think about a fair wage, we have to think about not $15 an hour, but $20 an hour. And the reason I'm putting forward $20 an hour is because this represents acknowledgement of a fundamental principle on which any realistic increase in standard of living can be based, and that's the connection between wage rates and productivity levels. In 1968, the minimum wage was $1.60 an hour. If you adjust that for inflation, it comes to $10.51. If you adjust it further for productivity gains, it gets to over $22 per hour. In 1973, the connection between wage rates and productivity levels was separated for good. From 1945 to 1973, wages rose as the economy increased its productivity, but in 73, for reasons that we can think about, that stopped, wages stagnated, our country became more and more unequal, economic growth declined, because with all that wealth going to the top, trillions and trillions of dollars were sitting idle, not being put back into the economy. If we have full employment guaranteed by the true right to work, we will have the maximum of consumer demand. We will be shielded from the downturns of the economy, where mass unemployment produces an absence of consumer demand. But it's not enough to just provide jobs for everyone at a wage that will end once and for all poverty wages. We need also to balance the relationship between employers and employees. Because if we let the market go about its own business, employers will inevitably have greater opportunities than employees. Competition requires employers to grow, and there are inevitably far fewer employers than there are employees. There's an imbalance in opportunity simply because of that. So we have to operate on two fronts. And once again, I'm talking about proposals that no government official, no candidate, no Democrat has been standing for. First of all, we have to transform the structure of corporate boards. We have to ensure that the seats on corporate boards, that half of them are filled by non-managerial employees, so that for once, employees have a seat on the table, so that no longer will boards of directors employ CEOs more than 300 times what the average worker is making. No longer will corporate boards decide to automate without caring for the interests of consumers and employees. No more will things be outsourced without taking into account the interests of employees. On the other hand, we have to take measures to ensure that every employee has the opportunity to engage in collective bargaining with their employer. The NLRB has failed to provide the right to collective bargaining. Only 6% of workers in the private sector are now unionized. Employees are at their greatest degree of powerlessness, and the results for all of us, I think, are obvious. So we have to transform the very relations between employer and employee, by requiring all employees of multiple workers, be they full-time, part-time, or freelancers, that they be required to engage in collective bargaining with their employees. But this is not enough. It's not enough to restore dignity at the workplace, where employees are treated with respect and have some fair say in what goes on in the workplace. We also have to balance livelihood and family. Because you can't take advantage of jobs, you can't take advantage of employee empowerment if you can't take care of your family. And there are two sides to this. And once again, I'm putting forward proposals that you know perfectly well are not being presented by any other candidate or any government official. On the one hand, we have to ensure that employers give employees the opportunity to deal with their family issues. We need to require, as other countries do, that everyone have a 1-month paid vacation. We have to ensure that everyone be given a 9-month paid parental leave when they have to deal with a new child entering the world. On the other hand, we have to guarantee that there is free public daycare for all and free public elder care, because we know perfectly well that there are many Americans who cannot afford to go to work because they can't afford to pay for child care. They can't afford to care for their elders, who, as they get older, may need 24-hour care. In addition, we know perfectly well that even if we have a fair minimum wage, even if we have employee empowerment, the amount of funds we need depends upon how many dependents we have. So we need to destroy childhood poverty once and for all by not only guaranteeing everyone employment who is able to work, not only guaranteeing a fair wage, but we have to ensure that there are child allowances of $500 per month per child for every parent who has to raise children. Now, these are transformative issues, and we can afford it. We are the richest nation in human history, and we need to shift the burden of paying for these measures from those who are suffering economically to those who have in their hands the greatest accumulations of wealth in human history. And the inequalities are not as pronounced in differences in income as they are in differences in wealth. There are huge accumulations of wealth, and we need to start tapping wealth through a highly graduated wealth tax. Because the amount of wealth in our country, which is now over $90 trillion, is 6 times the amount of the national income. Now, having a fair tax system, having these rights that deal with family and work is not going to be good if we can't take care of health care. Many people are talking now for the first time of single-payer health care, of having Medicare for all. Well, I'm now old enough to experience Medicare. And I can tell you, as some of you already know, and others will find out, Medicare is not good enough. Medicare does not cover everything. You need supplemental insurance. It has copays, it has other expenses, it doesn't cover all our prescriptions. So we need a super Medicare for all that will provide the health care we need for physical, mental, and dental care with no copays, no deductibles, no charges for prescriptions. And this, again, should be funded by putting the burden of taxation on those of the upper class. One last thing, we cannot defend any of our rights unless we all have access to legal representation. Our Constitution provides us with guaranteed legal representation for criminal cases. But as we all know, you have to depend upon legal aid lawyers or court-appointed lawyers who don't have adequate funding, are not necessarily interested in defending you. And regarding civil cases, which deal with some of the most important issues in our lives, we have no right to representation. We need a legal care system for all, modeled on a single-payer healthcare system, where we can go to any lawyer we want, and a government-funded insurance scheme will pay for whatever legal costs we have for personal, civil, and criminal cases. These policies represent a new birth of freedom. And if the Democratic Party is going to energize itself and not fall into further defeat, it has to make sure that the candidates who represent it stand up for a new social bill of rights. I will be announcing officially in January. I hope that you will give me a chance to present more of my policies to you in Indivisible and other venues. My name is Richard Dean Winfield. You can find out more about me on my website, Richard Dean Winfield, that's D-I-E-N, richarddeanwinfield.com. I have a webpage, Richard Dean Winfield. I have a YouTube channel, Richard Dean Winfield. Thank you for your time. I'm running for Congress. I will announce officially in January in the 10th District against Jody Heiss. As a state employee, I have to go on unpaid leave before I announce officially. I've applied for unpaid leave, it's been given to me. I will go on unpaid leave in January, and then I will no longer have one hand tied behind my back. Thank you.
You got one thing with a you or
Last election, nobody run against Heiss. Now he's getting 2 or 3 good ones. That's good, that's good. We're going to move on a little quickly because we're long for time. But we got a lot of preachers in the room. And we got a lot of preachers in the room, and I'm going to ask a good reverend friend of mine to introduce our last candidate we had.